Are you tired of the same old streaming options? Introducing Myco, the revolutionary Web3 content platform where you can not only watch films, TV shows, user-generated content, live events, and listen to podcasts, but earn from them too. Myco commissions and produces content that connects and empowers both viewers and creators in a fully decentralized video ecosystem. With live monetization, crowdfunding, NFT gating, and even the opportunity for fractional ownership of content, Myco is changing the game. Myco, join the conversation and start earning today. Download the app from the Apple and Google Play app stores.
Telecast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's Telecast. Before we start the show, I just wanted to say a really big thank you to everyone who's got in contact about Telecast so far. We've now got listeners in 31 countries around the world, so thanks for your support and all your comments and guest suggestions. Please do keep them coming. As ever, please do keep sharing Telecast with friends and colleagues on social media and give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us grow our audience. So, enough of all that. Let's get on with this week's show. On this week's Telecast, entertainment industry veteran and co-founder of E-Entertainment Television, Larry Namer, joins me alongside Manori Ravindran, international editor of Variety. Peter White from Deadline with all the latest Hollywood TV news. And K7 Media's Girts Licis brings us up to date on non-scripted formats. It's all coming up on this week's Telecast. So my guests this week are names familiar to many in the international TV industry. Larry Namer is an entertainment industry veteran with close on 50 years professional experience in cable television, live events and new media. Larry is a co-founder of E-Entertainment Television, a company now valued at over $4 billion US, and more recently Metan Global Entertainment Group, a venture created to develop and distribute entertainment content for Chinese-speaking audiences in China and abroad. Larry is also an executive producer of the new TV drama Nova Vita and on the recently announced feature film Empress, and a new travel series for the China audience entitled Explore the World. Manori is international editor of Variety, based out of London, where she manages the global team of correspondents, in addition to reporting on the international film and TV markets. She was previously editor of Television Business International magazine, and prior to that, international editor of UK Trade Weekly Broadcast. She got a start in the industry at Real Screen magazine, where she served as news editor covering the documentary and non-scripted market. So welcome to Telecast, Larry Namer and Manori Ravindran. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Hey Justin, doing well.
Great to have you guys on the show this week. Larry, if we can come to you first. So you're a veteran of the cable TV industry. You've got a new venture, and I gather you've got a new scripted series you've launched to the international market. Tell us a little bit about that.
We are working with a group here called USA TV, which is actually the folks that used to own the Armenian TV station in Armenia, and that they moved to the US and they started that. So with Bogart Sargsyan, his brother Vaughn, they were actually the creators. Marty Pompadour and I came on as executive producers to help guide this thing. And we created a series that called Nova Vita. Its season 1 is 10 parts. We decided that rather than go out and pitch it to the networks first and then ask them to provide the production money, that we would actually finance this thing internally. Which we did because we had a very clear picture of how we wanted the creative to go. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you go to a network and you ask them for money, they change your creative entirely and you end up producing something very different than what your vision was. So we financed it. Basically, USA TV provided all the financing and they have facilities. And we used a lot of people from existing TV shows. People from Bosch and Prison Break that, folks know and stuff. So we had a shot. We were thinking that we'll kind of leisurely edit it over the summer and take it out to market, like in, at MIP or something in the fall. And then the pandemic and the quarantines hit. And we realized that there wasn't a heck of a lot in the pipeline, particularly for the digital networks that just constant, their appetite for content is voracious. So we accelerated the post-production schedule, and we finished the 10 episodes, and it's ready for broadcast. And we just brought on a sales person to take it out internationally. And so we're out there with a completed series that's, world class with known stars and stuff. So, our timing worked out really well on that.
All right. We'll make sure to put a link to the trailer in the description of the podcast so people can check that out. So you're distributing that yourself. You've not appointed a global distributor. You're going to be selling that direct.
No, we brought in a guy named Michael Lurie, and Michael and his team are going to distribute it for us, and they're going out and they're reaching out, not just to the U.S. digitals, but we think it plays really well internationally because when you look at it, it does look very international. I mean, it actually looks more like a European production than it does a U.S. because we used, directors and DPs and stuff that really had, kind of global background and stuff. So it's not your typical, very American-looking show. It's much more international. So we just started taking that out, with the pandemic and the quarantines. It's not that easy to get people's attention. But, it's a finished series. It looks good. It's got known stars. It's already financed, so we're incredibly confident that this will be off the market very quickly.
Yeah, we'll all the best with that. We have seen a bit of a gold rush in terms of English-speaking drama content recently. The last couple of weeks, a lot of deals being done. Yep. So you hopefully your timing's ideal with that. So, as an industry veteran, how do you see this market now? Obviously, massive disruption in terms of the streamers. Obviously, unprecedented disruption in the linear industry in terms of production and all the obstacles that have been put in place to making TV shows. You were obviously instrumental within the cable boom. Do you see similarities in terms of all these new players today that are competing, or do you see this as like something that's completely unprecedented?
Well, I think I'm probably a little bit different than most of the people in Hollywood in that, I do go back a long time. I go back to, the first days of home box office and stuff, where people would tell me, they say, Larry, you should find a real job. Nobody will ever pay for cable or pay for television and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I've always been, I was a primary consultant at Microsoft for interactive TV going back 25 years and stuff. So I've always really kept up with the technology. And at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller. Quite honestly, I don't really care, what wire or over what air you're going to get my programs. It's the quality of the story, the audience behavior has changed, and you have to keep up with that as a producer and understand the way people consume media now, which is different than the way they did back in the linear days. But I've always been while I am known for E and, cable television, I've always really looked at technology as bringing in new ways to tell stories. And I've never really been a fan of linear TV. I mean, who wants to watch what NBC wants you to watch, what they want, when they want you to watch it, on the device they want you to watch it? I mean, it was clear to me, 20 years ago that those days are going to be long gone. I love digital, and I love the opportunity it gives that the audience to really, take control over the screen, whatever that screen may be. And for a storyteller, the world has never been better. I still have friends in Hollywood that go, "Oh, we feel so bad that TV is dead." And I go, it's not dead. Quite honestly, storytelling has never been better than it is today. I think Netflix has just done wonders to raise the bar and make everybody, whether it be HBO or, Prime or Disney, it's made everybody better. I mean, the level of competition is so fierce that when you make something, it has to be really, really good. And I can't watch all the good stuff on. I mean, I cast the stuff up to my TV, and I love watching it on the 65-inch. But there's amazing stuff on that. Like I say, you can't watch all the good stuff that's on there. So it's a good world.
Yeah. I mean, do you see all these new models that are now competing, whether it's SVOD or transactional video on demand or AVOD, for example? I mean, do you see, if you were to put your money into one type of digital platform or digital service, would it be a subscription model? Would it be a transactional model? Would it be an ad-funded model? Or would it be something?
I think it's a hybrid, actually.
Yeah.
I love the models where the consumer gets to make the choice. I think, as long as you go with the audience makes a choice, you really can't go wrong. So, some people who want to watch it without ads and stuff and have the financial wherewithal up for, that kind of situation, and, other people, but, it's still accessible to other people who watch it as an ad supported and stuff like that. So I think it's really a combination. I don't think there's any one way that you'll say. I mean, right now, I'm a great lover of AVOD. It just lets me do anything I want to do whenever I want to do it. I could watch it on my cell phone. I could watch it on my big TV and stuff like that. And again, it really comes down to choice, consumer choice. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, well, coming on to your first story. So this is about production coming back, and particularly in the US. How do you think production is going to change then, as the US industry in particular gets back to work?
Well, right now there's incredible confusion because each state, there's really been no national directive as to how we're going to handle this. So you really have to look at it on a state by state basis and say, what are they doing now? What are the state regulations now? Then you got to start evaluating political situations and saying, okay, the governor of Georgia is always kind of responded this way. So, do I move my production to Atlanta or do I take it to Louisiana? Or do we do it here in Hollywood, which is probably the most strict restrictions right now? And so right now, it's really a lot of confusion. People don't know what to do. I mean, we have stuff that we were ready to put in production, and we're kind of sitting here and we go, you know what? We're really not sure because we haven't received any directives that we think will last into the future. LA is really tough because we're still on severe lockdown.
That's LA County, right? LA County seems to be behind the rest of California.
Yeah, California has loosened up a little. Not so much in the production end, but just in, where people could go in restaurants and beaches and that kind of stuff. But LA is, really tough. And, you've got, cities surrounding it, which follow the LA County directive, Burbank and those places. And so, right now we have put everything that we're doing on hold at least till the fall. We don't see it really coming back before the fall, if then. We think that's even optimistic. But, we're hoping for the best, but planning for the worst, I guess.
All right. Okay. And I know that you're involved in some international co-productions, and we'll come back to you a little later and we can discuss those in a little bit more detail. Manori, thanks for joining us. Great to have you on the show. How's the lockdown affected things over at Variety?
Great to be here, Justin. Thank you so much for having me. It's affected us just as it's affected, most other media organizations. Variety has a pretty robust live events, business, which obviously has had to be re-envisioned and retooled a little bit. And I have to say, I'm quite new to the organization, having only joined in January. But it's been pretty impressive to sort of see those guys, the events team and all of the producers and even editorial really sort of rejig their strategy and rethink, effectively innovate, really, like everybody has had to do in this industry far and wide. But just think, how can we provide a value-added service that's a bit more accessible? I mean, that's in a way, that's kind of the beauty of this period as well, in the sense that information is so accessible now. In many ways, it's a lot easier to get access to the goings-on and the details of what's really happening in the industry from your own home. So I love that the barriers have sort of come down in a sense too.
Yeah. Yeah, and everyone's schedules, you always know where everybody is, right? Nobody can actually go anywhere, so it's like, okay, you may be on a Zoom call, but we know where you are.
Yes.
So presumably the print issues of Variety have stopped, and you're just focusing on digital.
Actually, no.
Okay.
Do you know what? They have not. They are still printing, which is incredible. So there is a whole team every week that is still, our production team is just incredible. They're wonderful people, and they are working so hard trying to get that magazine out. A lot of these cover stories are planned very well in advance, and it's to be honest, there has been a lot of rejigging in terms of things that perhaps were coming up the pike that maybe might not seem as appropriate, I guess, for the current circumstances that I've had to, and the whole team has really pitched in terms of, okay, this is like, I guess from my perspective as a journalist, we've seen this kind of happen in waves. Initially it's sort of like, okay, lockdown is happening. What does that mean? And then it's like, okay, things are at a standstill. Now what? And then, there's a glimmer of hope with the recovery plans. And so as that process has happened, so has editorial adapted to all of those changes, and thinking, okay, what cover story fits this week of lockdown and this phase of restarting production. So it's a testament to really Claudia Eller, who's our editor, and she's my boss, but I'm not just saying that. She really is incredible, and the way she's kind of navigated this has been really awe-inspiring.
Yeah, well, it's been really interesting to see your editorial coverage as well. There's been not only obviously covering the international TV industry, but it's been, personally, I think it's been really interesting to see how the theatre industry has been adapting or trying to adapt to getting theatrical releases back again. And I guess there's still a long way to go with that, but that's been really, really interesting to read. So your first story this week is about BBC Three. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, BBC Three. This was not a surprise, given that it has been rumored for some time. There has been a big push as well to get the channel back on air, but to actually have the BBC, just last Tuesday night, I believe, they effectively confirmed that they were considering bringing BBC Three, which was a digital channel that was taken off the air back in 2016 in order to save about £30 million, and they're now considering putting it back on air, back as a linear channel. Tony Hall over the weekend on the Andrew Marr show on Sunday effectively confirmed as well, saying that the corporation has learned from that kind of online experiment, I like to think of it as, and honestly, him saying that really made me think, okay, this is a very strong possibility. It's happening, exactly. In my opinion, I think that's very much going to happen. The question, of course, is what will happen to BBC 4, which has been, there have been a lot of question marks around that brand's future. And in the annual plan last week, the BBC confirmed that they would effectively free up money for BBC 3 going back on air by then kind of recalibrating BBC 4 as a global like SVOD proposition, basically. Which also makes sense. And
for everybody who's not familiar with BBC 4, so what sort of content does BBC 4 specialise in?
BBC 4 is specialist factual, really, and a lot of history and factual content, science programs, documentaries too. I mean, Storyville is effectively a BBC 4 strand as well. So I mean, I think that's really going to hit the documentary industry pretty hard. Which is, in terms of the UK and in terms of a prime slot, it really is very much that slot on BBC 4. So that will be that will be for sure a loss. But then I suppose if you have BBC Three then going back on air, and with this huge investment now coming into BBC Three, a doubling of the spend from 30 to 40 million per year to 60 to 80, which is great. I think that there could be a lot more opportunity. And also, to be honest, with the documentary kind of sphere, if you look at what, the big shows, the big docs that have really cut through in the last couple of years, it is very much youth-skewing kinds of programs like Fire, the Fire Festival doc that Netflix did, Tiger King. These are youth-skewing documentary programs that I think are very much kind of hitting the zeitgeist at a certain point and doing very, very well. So perhaps that opportunity still exists for a documentary on BBC Three linear.
Okay, but in general, it's essentially BBC looking at that youth audience, bringing that back into the heart of the corporation and really focusing on those younger viewers that perhaps have been neglected a little bit over the years.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, interesting. And of course, his Director General post is up for grabs right at the moment. What's the latest on the runners and riders for that, one of the biggest jobs in TV?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Tony Hall basically took the whole industry really by surprise at the end of January when he announced that he would be stepping down this summer. He said that July was sort of his targeted exit date. And at the very beginning, to be honest, it's a couple of the same people that we're sort of seeing in the short list now, which is Tim Davie, director of BBC Studios, and Charlotte Moore, director of content for the BBC. Both of them are now on the short list. But also we saw earlier people like Alex Mahon and Jay Hunt sort of being considered. Liz Murdoch as well was her name was thrown out there, and I asked her directly about that, and she said she sort of laughed and said it was putting the cat amongst the pigeons. So she was never part of this race, but it was a lot of people like that over the last month or so. Effectively, there's been a clearer pool of who is in the running, and now it is effectively 4 people, except I think it could very well be 3 people given some of the events of the last week. So we're looking again at Tim Davie, Charlotte Moore, Doug Gur, who is country manager for Amazon out of the UK and Ireland, and Will Lewis, who was a general manager for a news group previously. Will Lewis, in particular, has gotten into some hot water over some allegations of his involvement in the phone hacking scandal in the last week, and so he's actually it does creep up on you. So he's actually probably not going to be in this race for much longer, as I understand it. That's a pretty damning evidence to have come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Alex Mahon, has she counted herself out of the race now?
I did actually ask her about this during an interview a couple of months ago, right before the lockdown, or a couple of weeks before the lockdown, and she didn't say no, and that was the second time I'd asked her about it. So it seemed as though, just kind of given her history as well, she's so ambitious. She's absolutely incredible, having worked at, Shine Group and then the Foundry and Channel 4. She always kind of goes for it. But I think the particular circumstances with Channel 4 amid this pandemic, I just think that, she really needs to stay put. And there is a lot of work for her left at Channel 4. Certainly at the beginning of the outbreak, that was true, and especially more so now. So I think we can probably count Alex out.
Right, yeah. There's a whole reimagining of what they look like, I think, over the next 18 months as a commercial organisation, I'm sure. So
definitely.
Well, that's definitely one for us to keep our eyes on, which is, as I say, one of the biggest jobs in TV. So that'll be fascinating. We'll be looking to see, and also to see who gets the scoop on that, because that's going to be the prize scoop in the industry to get that story. Larry, your second story concerns China. We touched on it a little bit earlier. One of your companies is a joint venture with a Chinese business. Can you tell us a little bit about that, first of all?
Sure. My partner in China is Marty Pompadour. Marty was the chairman of News Corp Europe. He was Rupert's partner for many years, and then he retired because he wanted to come and go after China business with me, and so we've been doing that for about 10 years now. And we have a partner in Beijing called Meitian Meiyu Beijing Cultural Company, which holds licenses to produce TV and film and live events. And and all of that. So we've been there for about 10 years now. We've had 5 series on TV, which is great. And we kind of cross genres. We've done reality, we've done drama series. We even have had a sitcom on national TV in China, which was, quite an accomplishment since I wrote it.
Right.
It was called Return to the Village of Good Fortune. It's about what happens when a country undergoes incredible economic growth in a short period of time and people's social skills don't grow as quickly as their bank accounts. And that actually ran 70 episodes, which, makes me feel quite good. And then we do feature film. We have in the process a film called Empress about the first and only woman ruler of China. And we were, about to start locking in directors and other people when this pandemic hit. And the idea for that film is, it's interesting because 4 years ago when I bought the book rights, the book called Empress, and I said I wanted to do the movie in English using American-born Chinese and Canadian-born Chinese, everybody laughed and said, Larry, you can't do a film with all Asian actors. It'll never sell. And then Crazy Rich Asians hit, and everybody came back to us and said, hey, you remember that movie you were talking about? Do you still want to do it? And the idea was to shoot half of the movie in Xi'an, China, and actually the other half in Vancouver. But, that's been put on hold. Just all of our TV production is on hold. We were in the process of, we had 2 big travel-related series. One called Explore China, where we looked at China through, Western eyes and really dealt with the pop culture and stuff, not so much the history. And that was, going to be sold to one of the Western digital platforms. And then we're doing another series called Explore the World, which was really geared to Chinese tourism, bringing Chinese tourists, which are now the largest outbound tourist group in the world, to places beyond, Paris and London, which they already know. We actually started shooting in the Balkans. Shooting in Croatia when this hit. We had to bring all the teams home and put everything on pause. And, so that's, I know we do some live events. We're doing a thing we got from Milan called the Da Vinci Experience, which is a live museum show, which you would see. And it was in Beijing for 8 months and then Shanghai for 8 months. And we've had to put that on hold because you can't congregate people the way you used to. So that's kind of, what we've been up to in China.
Okay. And what about the production status of TV in China at the moment? Where are things at over there?
It's pretty restricted, or if we were shooting all in sound stages, on the outskirts of Beijing or Shanghai, we could probably continue those. But, like I say, our 2 main series were travel-related. So you can't travel around China now and stuff. There's, Wuhan is back on, a limited quarantine, and now they've just taken, the northeast of China and quarantined that and stuff. So it's just too uncertain to go back into production with a show like that, which really does rely on traveling teams throughout the country. And,
yeah.
So, we're looking at end of summer at the very earliest to resume production, at the very earliest.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you got a lot still to film on that particular series?
Oh, God, yeah.
Right.
We, on Explore China, it was going to be a 20-part, 20 half hours, and we shot 13, so we're posting those now. And then we could certainly go to market with less than 20. I mean, 13 half hours is still pretty good.
What network is that for?
We designed it, and again, we're in a fortunate spot now. We managed to find financing and do stuff without the networks having to finance. So, that's a good one for Netflix or Amazon or even a Disney, or it could be Peacock or, one of those. So, we're confident we'll sell that pretty quickly. And then the other one is called Explore the World, which is meant for the China audience, and that's designed to go on, the big China platforms, Youku and iQIYI and stuff like that, which they apologize for only having a few 100 million viewers.
And so, Larry, you seem to have cracked the way to really do business in China, right? And when it comes to TV production, in a way that many people in the UK and maybe in Hollywood as well have struggled to in the past for various reasons. Why is your business working so well?
Well, when we looked at it, I first looked and said, why have all the Western companies failed? Particularly a study into Rupert Murdoch and his efforts in China and stuff. And it wasn't hard to realize, I went there myself and I spent a lot of time there myself. So, everything was firsthand. I wasn't getting it from, the lonely person in the office who, we couldn't figure what to do with, and we send them to China and hope that they knew what they were doing. So I spent a lot of time there talking to people in China, and it became really clear to me that you can't take what you do in Australia and say, hey, I'm going to give you my show that we do in Australia and I'll subtitle it in Mandarin for you. The Chinese just laughed at that. And when I would talk to them, and I hate to say it, I don't drink that much, but essentially a lot of these people became drinking buddies. And they'd say, Larry, how much French programming is on NBC? And I go, what do you mean? They go, how much French programming do they have on NBC? And I go, well, none. They go, okay, so we're 3 times bigger than you. Why would we put on TV shows, not made for our audience, in a language that, isn't ours? Why would we put that on our national TV when you won't do it? And I started to realize that they're really, really right, and it goes beyond political and nationalism and stuff. The audience is different in China than it is in most places that I've ever, been to. And I said, I have to produce in Mandarin, and I have to produce specifically for the Chinese audience. So the first show that I did there was called English Hello Hollywood, which is kind of like an E-News Daily thing, but it was really geared to the Chinese audience, which was very different. I mean, it was much, here the benchmark for celebrity programming is the TMZ kind of stuff. Let's find somebody cheating on their wife and we'll, expose them and ruin their life kind of stuff. In China, people, if I were going to interview Tom Cruise in the U.S., they'd say, well, ask him about Scientology and that religion. In China, they want to know, what does he do with his kids on the weekend? So we brought in Chinese hosts. The entire team, other than myself, is Chinese, so they really understand the market and the audience and stuff. And we produced a show that ran 8 years, entirely in Mandarin, geared to, I had Chinese hosts running around LA, going to the parties and the premieres and all of that.
And your company's a joint venture, isn't it? Which presumably allows you to share IP and share, have a full co-production, because I think that's what a lot of companies have struggled with in the past, is the fact that they think they can go in as an American or UK as a Western business.
You're not going to jump into the media world. And so, we started doing a lot of stuff there, and we're non-political. I mean, we don't really get involved in any political issues and stuff, and so people just got comfortable with us that we're not going to try and free Tibet or, do that kind of stuff. And so our programming is done really well. We've had drama series. We have this comedy series. We're doing some films and stuff. But we really concentrate on the market. We look and say, what do the Chinese people want to see? Not what can we sell around the world. And having a company that was China-centric, whether it be things for the China market or things made in China for the world market, really has allowed us to do deep dive and be very authentic.
Yeah, well, we still see that China is a huge opportunity for Western businesses, and certainly China exporting to the world is again another massive opportunity, which up to this point has only had a certain level of success. So be interesting to see how businesses like yours can help help bridge that gap. Manori, coming on to your second story, this is about Temptation Island.
Yeah, that's right. This was a piece that we ran last week, which I thought was quite interesting given some of the headlines that we were seeing about Love Island. But Temptation Island, as we all know, was a Ben and Jay owned format. It was on years ago on Fox, I believe, and just in the last couple of years has had a resurgence. USA Network took the format 2 years back, and has renewed it for a second season as well. And Ben and Jay has done very well selling that show to a number of different international territories. And like many of the other reality competition shows that are also a little focused on relationships and couples and that sort of that piece, there were questions as to how these shows are going to, how on earth are they going to resume? Clearly, some of these casts and crews, as well, the cast specifically, given all the everything that goes down on these programs, especially without a vaccine now in these COVID times, how can these shows possibly start up again?
Maybe social distancing is going to help in terms of Temptation Island. Maybe putting them even further apart.
Perhaps.
But seriously, I mean, there's obviously a huge investment going in there and a real sort of ballsy approach to production to get this going. It's obviously a massive format, very important, but it's very bullish really to put this together. So how are they going to pull it off?
Well, effectively, what they're doing is they are going to, and I believe production starts in July in the Dominican Republic. That's the goal, certainly for the Spanish version of the show, and potentially the German version as well. And they are going to quarantine the cast and crew for 2 weeks. They're going to test people, and also, and I suppose if, and depending on what happens, they will quarantine them for 2 weeks, and they will effectively have testing throughout production too, in case symptoms emerge later on, which actually I thought was and they're not alone in this. Like, we're seeing that being considered now for a number of different productions, but.
And sports, right? I mean, football teams, that's how they're actually restarting, domestic sports around the world.
Exactly. So yeah, it's not unique just to Temptation Island by any means, but it is quite interesting. And I suppose it lends itself very well, if you think about it, to a show like this. I mean, my guess is that the crew will need to be different in terms of size from normal. So it'll be a smaller production. Realistically, a lot of shows will be going forward. But I think it can still work, and I thought it was quite an innovative strategy. And also, given that Love Island, the ITV bosses thought that show was perhaps a little bit too risky this year, it will be interesting to see whether they look to something like Temptation Island and the learnings from that, and perhaps adapt. I mean, my understanding is that ITV is very, very keen to protect that brand, and so they're hesitant to go ahead with Love Island even after everything sort of starts getting back to normal a little bit in late summer, just because they want Love Island to really be Love Island as we all know it every summer. They don't want it to be sort of a kind of a low definition version of what that show is. So we'll see. I mean, they may perhaps just go ahead with that winter version, which they cleverly programmed in January, did well for them. This year, it's going to do gangbusters for them, given the void that there's been this summer. People just so thirsty, really, for Love Island content. I have to say the timing of no Love Island this year as well was overall probably pretty good for ITV, given this controversy with Caroline Flack in February. That was not very long ago. There were a lot of questions of how that show would handle, who would host the show. Would Laura Whitmore come back? So many questions around Love Island this summer. So I suppose in a way this is probably not the worst thing in the world for them. It gives them a little bit of extra time to rethink their strategy for the UK show. Yeah. So we'll see what they do in January, probably.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that obviously ITV deciding not to go ahead with filming their biggest show, whereas Banijay and are working with broadcasters around the world to actually make sure theirs happens. It's not just as simple as that, as you say. There are other issues around the Love Island brand that I'm sure they're wanting to take the time around and absolutely get right, and basically pausing on that is their long-term strategy. So interesting. So thanks for that, Manori. So now it's time to nominate your hero of the week and who you could be telling to get in the bin. So Manori, we'll start with you. Who's your hero of the week?
Well, I would say, I'm cheating a little bit, but I would say my heroes of the week are probably all of the political journalists who have been working their butts off this past weekend covering the Dominic Cummings scandal, which is just completely, it's been all anyone has talked about this past week. It came about as a result of a joint exclusive investigation by the Mirror and the Guardian, the Observer, I believe, which was so impressive. The level of that journalism, they've been working on it for some time, and look what it's accomplished. Everyone, well, hopefully it will accomplish some more, but I was so impressed by, especially at a time where so many of us are working around the clock trying to cover all of the changes that this pandemic has brought on, to see people spending their weekends just, putting the government's feet to the fire was so impressive, and it makes me so proud to be a journalist, and hats off to all of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's certainly an impressive scoop. I mean, for anybody that's not aware of this internationally, this was Dominic Cummings, who is a chief advisor to Boris Johnson, obviously Prime Minister of the UK, who was outed having taken a 260-mile trip to Durham whilst his wife was suffering from coronavirus, and actually the next day he appeared to come down with it as well, which was essentially against the official government guidelines that the rest of the country has been abiding by to a large extent anyway. So yeah, and this is a huge story that, as you say, Manori, interestingly has united the left and the right of the newspapers as well, which is a very rare thing to happen when you see the Daily Mail calling for Dominic Cummings to resign, who's obviously a right-wing government and a key strategic advisor. So absolutely, amazing journalistic work there. Larry, how about you? Who's your hero of the week?
Well, I'll stay away from the political, but I'm constantly amazed at the quality of visual storytelling that's out there. Like I say, it's never been better. And all this TV is dead stuff doesn't really mean anything. But I watched the show last week on Netflix, and I just walk away, from just shaking my head and say, how do people do this? It's just amazing. I want to one day be able to produce stuff at this level. So it's the team that created the show and produced a show called Unorthodox on Netflix, which, here's a TV show that's, 4 episodes done in Yiddish language, which probably hasn't been spoken, since Germany in the 30s or whatever. And just enthralling. Just the storytelling is amazing. The acting with all, pretty much all unknowns, just incredible and stuff. So it's the team who made that show, which, kind of my heroes for last week.
Okay, interesting. Well, I've heard a lot of talk about this show. I haven't actually seen it yet, but as you were saying earlier on, there's so much to see, and mind you, there's no really excuse. We're not allowed to go out, so maybe I should be watching even more TV and content. Okay, but I'll make sure that we check out Unorthodox. And who are you going to put in the bin?
Well,
Larry, who are you telling to get in the bin? Who or what?
Well, then I do fall into the political and stuff, because here in America, we're fortunate or unfortunate that we have, a president who just tweets away, and we can wake up every morning and it's the greatest show on earth. Whether you agree with it or not, just watching what comes out of the White House every evening is beyond, you couldn't write this stuff.
It's going to make a great season of The West Wing, isn't it, in a couple of years, when the Trump years.
Yeah, so, in the bin goes Donald Trump.
And Manori, who or what are you telling to get in the bin? And I think I might be able to guess the answer to this.
My nominees for people to get in the bin would be Dominic Cummings. And to be honest, if I could perhaps add on to that, I would say some of our political leaders who I personally feel have not only let the country down by having one standard for themselves and another standard for everybody else, but also the lack of support that we're seeing for some of the, our industry, film and TV industry, which contributes so much to our economy, and yet we've yet to see any meaningful support for freelance creative workers, people who are struggling, who might not even return to the industry. What will that do to the diversity of our industry? It's been heartbreaking to cover some of these stories, to constantly be getting survey results every single week, pleas from various organizations to cover, their letter to their MP or their letter to Rishi Sunak. We have been trying to accommodate, but ultimately it is, I think, a huge failing on the part of the government that they are not recognizing the creative industry and its contribution to the economy. I think it's deplorable. And I honestly, if not more is done about it, I'm not entirely sure what's going to face our industry going forward. It is of great concern, and I think for all of those reasons, they all should get in the bin.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. I think that's. I think everybody listening to this is probably broadly on side with that. Manori, Larry, thank you so much for your time. Really delighted that you guys agreed to come on telecast. So it's been fantastic having you on the show, and good luck with everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Justin.
Great, thank you.
Good luck.
So we've reached that time in the show again where we're joined by Peter White from Deadline. Hi, Peter. How you doing? How's Hollywood?
Hi, Justin. Yeah, all good. Coming off the back of Memorial Day weekend. Sun shining. Got to drive up the PCH in a truck like all good Americans should do at their bank holidays.
This is nice. It sounds a lot better than going down to Skegness. You've been up Malibu way.
It's a bit similar. It's the West Coast equivalent. I drove up to a place called Neptune's Net, which is a biker bar turned fish restaurant. So that was how I spent my Memorial Day. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Very nice. Well, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about the upfronts. They're still going on, aren't they?
Yeah.
I've still seen some announcements.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, they're stringing it out. Obviously, because of COVID, they weren't able to gather in New York and do their general week of events. So everyone's sort of taking their own time on this. Last week was ABC, the last one, the most recent one to launch. They did something quite similar to CBS, really. They renewed a whole bunch of shows. It was 13 shows. Things like Stumptown and Mixed-ish, which are freshman shows, first-year shows, which shows what they think of those. But they also cancelled a bunch of shows. They cancelled things like Emergent and Bless This Mess. What was interesting was that, amongst those renewals and cancellations, they picked up 2 shows straight to series that hadn't been piloted. A show called The Big Sky, which is a procedural from David E. Kelly, and a multicam comedy called Call Your Mother, which is from the New Adventures of Christine creator Carrie Liza. That one's got Kyra Sedgwick in it. They haven't seen anything on those, but given the people behind them and the people in them, they figured that they'll make a bet on that. I guess what's interesting, or when they actually go into production on these and any of those renewals is a different question. But interesting to see where they're headed.
So is that all of the big networks now that have done their upfronts, or are there any more to come?
We're still waiting for NBC. It's sort of, I guess, the upfronts are sort of split in 2 things. There's 2 sides to it a little bit, really. There's the announcements of shows and renewals and cancellations, and then there's the schedules, which the Americans look at a lot more importantly than I guess we do in the UK. So it's sort of when a show airs, what's its lead in, what night is it. So they haven't all done that yet, but ABC similarly hasn't done their schedule. But that's the idea in terms of how importantly a show is for a network. You can sort of tell where they put it, whether something's on Sunday night or Thursday night and the time slot. So we're still waiting for a couple. It's going to run well into June. There's no real rush for them to do this any quicker. None of these shows are going to be on the very beginning of the fall. I would imagine, late September. I would imagine at the earliest. I mean, look, we haven't even got the guidelines to go back into production. So yeah, a lot to do before we see any more of that.
Okay, so as various sports around the world are starting to make tentative steps back, like the German Bundesliga and the Premier League and football in the UK and all around Europe is starting to come back. You've seen some unscripted developments in this space in the US, right?
Yeah, and I think around the world, really. I mean, everyone I know seems to have watched The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, whether they were a basketball fan or not. My boss, Mike Fleming, broke a big story last week about Tom Brady getting the Last Dance treatment. ESPN making a 9-part series called Man in the Arena about him, about the American footballer. That's interesting. It just feels like there's a little bit of a boom in that genre. We've always had some interesting films. We've always had 30 for 30, which is ESPN's sports block. But there's a big Lance Armstrong series on at the moment. There's a Tiger Woods film that's getting a bit of buzz here in the States. You've got Spurs, who are this season's All or Nothing on Amazon, which is sort of being filmed, I guess. I don't know if the Premier League ever does get back and my dear Liverpool can win the trophy. But it'll be interesting. All of that sort of points to a little bit more in this world. We've had, a boom in music documentaries over the last few years. True crime is obviously massive. And sports seems to be getting its moment in the sunshine right now, which, a good sports doc like Last Dance, these things can be brilliant. You get the right access. There's a sense of nostalgia. You sort of see that, especially, I guess, while you can't actually watch any sports on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've started to watch the Bundesliga. I've renewed my BT TV subscription. Fairly bizarre watching that with no crowd. It sounds like family swim at the pool when they're playing. So
I bet. Well, yeah, with Jurgen Klopp, I've got a little bit of a soft spot, but unfortunately for me, the time zones mean I can't really watch too much Bundesliga over here.
Yeah. That's right. Well, also in terms of sporting and unscripted and actually competition shows, Girts Licis on the show a couple of weeks ago mentioned the Container Cup as an interesting and hot new format coming out of Belgium. There's been some movements on that format in the States, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Him talking about it from a Belgian perspective, and over here in the States, a company called Three Ball, which used to produce The Biggest Loser. They now do Bar Rescue. They picked up the US rights, and they've just taken it out to broadcasters. It'll be really interesting to see if that one pops. They sort of have to do it now, I guess, over the next few weeks and months before people can actually start getting back to studios and such. But yeah, the idea of filming this stuff all in one big container, which is COVID proof, with some big talent, but also that it doesn't look like it was shot on an iPhone or filmed over a Zoom line, which I think people are a bit bored of that by now. You start to see the shows. There are still a few COVID shows that are being produced here, but the quality of them has to be a bit better. The American version of Gogglebox was a good example of that on Fox. It looks good because it's meant to be celebrities sitting watching TV in their house. So I think that's what sort of piqued my interest about the Container Cup. If you can get these big stars who can put one of these things in their back garden or their front lawns and compete in a bunch of different sports against each other, but I guess not really. That's something that could work as a sort of COVID-19 format. Whether it would work outside of that, I don't know. But I guess what will be interesting to see is whether it works outside of Belgium. I know there's a UK deal any day now, and I think there's been a bit of interest in the rest of Europe. So yeah, look, if this could be the rising star of COVID-19, then the Belgian company Primitive would be pretty chuffed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a whole load of Olympians that have not got anything in their diaries for a few months. So you never know. We might see Katrina Johnson-Thompson and various others in the UK version. You never know. Pete, great to speak to you again. Thanks as always, and enjoy that trip up. Are you going up the coast or down the coast next weekend?
Oh, next weekend. Yeah, maybe we'll go down the coast, head to Tijuana or something.
Oh, nice. Well, as we're still in lockdown, we can only dream of such exotic weekends. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to chatting next week.
Lovely. Thanks, mate.
So it's that time in the show once again to catch up with K7 Media's Girts Licis. And this week, Girts, you're turning your attention to non-scripted formats.
Yes, I certainly do, Justin. When talking about non-scripted formats, either entertainment or factual, one thing is very clear. There's no need to drop a project without even considering just because by the book it seems too big. What we see all around the world are numerous examples how existing formats can be adapted to the current restrictions, and those can range from a basic street game show to some of the biggest formats existing, like The Voice, X Factor, or The Masked Singer.
But these are all shows with large studio audiences as a key format component, aren't they?
True. Live audience has been one of the issues most often raised when discussing the impact that the social distancing measures have left on the overall atmosphere of the current TV productions. The solutions considered so far include not only the more obvious, like dropping the studio audience at all or adding it from the previous episode's footage at the edit stage, they are becoming more and more creative. The French production of Don't Forget the Lyrics now is airing with a cast of puppets in place of the audience, while Fox, as well as other major channels, are experimenting with VR technology to fill the empty stadiums with virtual sports fans during their sports broadcasts. And of course, this is something that could apply not only to sports broadcasts exclusively. In Spain, the talent reality Operation Triumph returned to air last week after 2 months' break without studio audience, but a virtual audience was created, with selected participants able to show their reactions via Zoom. During the break, all of the remaining participants had received various online masterclasses in the build-up to the gala show. Denmark has seen a successful return of the X Factor. A new season of The Voice launched also successfully in Australia last weekend, and a new season arriving also in Korea this week. But technically, the most ambitious production so far, in my opinion, has been the local adaptation of the quiz game format Beat the Crowd in Belgium, under the title 71. And in this show, one contestant is taking on the whole studio audience, which in Belgium's case consists of 70 people. The show is a long-running hit in Belgium, and they just couldn't live without it. So what they did was they arranged 71 simultaneous virtual feeds, including all the homes of audience members. But not only that, they even managed to employ a professional crowd warmer to work with a virtual audience and warm them up in the same way as it usually works in a live studio. Actually, it looks to me that Belgium as a country is certainly becoming one of the format's hotspots. We already reported about their newest idea, the Container Cup, which sees a number of sportsmen competing in a kind of compact Olympic Games using shipping containers delivered to their homes. And then the participant who makes the fastest time in a range of disciplines is crowned king or queen of the container. And I'm very pleased to tell you that not only the Belgium premiere was very well received with almost 30% share within the target group, but less than a month after its first launch, the format has already been optioned in such big markets as US and France.
Yeah, and Peter White from Deadline updated us on the latest on that Container Cup format earlier in the show, and the fact that it's been shopped in the US. So with all of this movement, are we seeing that competition shows are back bigger than ever as a result of the lockdown?
Yes. With lockdown measures gradually becoming less tight, we see that reality competition is definitely one genre that is coming back really fast and doesn't necessarily require containers for production, particularly now with summer bringing some of the most favorable weather for filming outdoors or at more outdoorsy locations at least, which are also providing a more secure production option. So we see broadcasters from the north to the south of Europe having opted for TV reality game formats which bring the necessary adrenaline dose to viewers which are lacking the sports competitions, while also attracting those who prefer to escape and indulge in the beauty of nature, getting lost in exotic locations, or feeling nostalgic watching iconic sites and productions. So, for example, the Swedish version of competition reality, The Fittest Family, will unfold in a mountainous environment where the competing families will live on a campsite and compete in the same challenges, but without mixing physically. Meanwhile, the French audiences are going to follow already the 31st season of their iconic Fort Boyard later this year, set in the famous castaway Mediterranean fortress. The game sees celebrities solving puzzles on a fortress island in the hope of winning potentially large cash prizes. And countries from Finland to Spain are proceeding with new seasons of The Temptation Island. The only difference that Finns this time had decided to film the show in their own waters instead of flying the crew over to some southern paradise island. And as we have discussed before, creativity is booming during the pandemics and new formats are also emerging. TF1 in France, for instance, is resuming the filming of a new game show, which sees 6 celebrities parachuted into a mysterious location run by a mad scientist with control over hundreds of zombies. And the stars then have to collect there as much cash as possible while avoiding being attacked by these zombies. We can almost, draw an analogy with a virus here.
Well, the Temptation Island and zombies, what's not to love, right? Interesting. So are there any other trends that you're seeing right now?
Well, not exactly a trend, but rather a phenomenon we currently notice is that how hungry people have become to socialize, or maybe just becoming bored and seeking some out-of-the-box adventures, like mixing with strangers on a TV show. I already reported before about a huge influx of applications for Finland's Big Brother a couple of weeks ago, but it seems like it's a broader trend, not just a Finnish phenomenon. In Belgium, for instance, previous registration records are broken for the shows like Married at First Sight and them all, and with first dates receiving 5,000 registrations in just one day after the final episode of the season, already equal to the total number of applications for the whole first season. Some popular formats currently on air, for instance, have also added a charity element, like in the case of Deal or No Deal in France, where a portion of the prize money will be donated to Paris hospitals fighting the virus. And as part of the nostalgia trend, we are also seeing formats and spin-offs bringing back participants of the previous seasons, like Bake Off at Home in Belgium, featuring past participants trying out some of the most memorable Bake Off creations at home together with their families, or A Farmer Wants a Wife special in the Netherlands, seeing the show's host visiting a number of previous participants.
So, Girts, you've been a producer and also a commissioner yourself. Is there a format you see as particularly well positioned for adaptation in the current circumstances?
Yes, Justin, there are definitely a few. And perhaps one that stands out for me in particular is This Time Next Year. I think that this format touches exactly upon those sentiments that are playing very well currently. It has a great timing to make a resolution, to change something in our lives, be it something personal or perhaps more community or society focused. We are also eagerly looking forward and wondering what this time next year will look like. So I would twist it a bit, recording the now part of the show as it is in today's reality via web tools, and then a year later, the achievement in the studio with a standing ovation from the live audience, hopefully, as per the original format. And actually, this reminds me of one of the 5 personal hygiene rules adopted in Korea, along with the other ones, which we can easily imagine, like washing your hands or keeping the distance. There is the 5th one, the 5th element, if you wish, and it sounds, always remember that the distance is far, but the heart is close.
Yes, indeed. And that's a great message to end on. And definitely those are formats that we'll keep our eye out, particularly after your earlier tip of the container cup. Girts, thanks so much as ever for coming on the show. It's going to be really interesting to see how those formats trends are going to develop. As Jan Salling mentioned on the show a few weeks ago, perhaps we're going to see an explosion of creativity from the unscripted formats industry sweeping across the world's networks in the months ahead. And I'm sure you're going to keep us posted on those.
Agreed. Let's talk next week again.
All right. Thank you, Girts.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Take care.
Well, that's just about it for this week's show. Thanks for listening, and please rate and subscribe to the show and share it with friends. Keep the messages and suggestions coming in, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll be back with another show next week. So in the meantime, stay safe.
Are you tired of the same old streaming options? Introducing Myco, the revolutionary Web3 content platform where you can not only watch films, TV shows, user-generated content, live events, and listen to podcasts, but earn from them too. Myco commissions and produces content that connects and empowers both viewers and creators in a fully decentralized video ecosystem. With live monetization, crowdfunding, NFT gating, and even the opportunity for fractional ownership of content, Myco is changing the game. #Myco. Join the conversation and start earning today. Download the app from the Apple and Google Play app stores.